My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sangran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnanis. Um, Today's chapter is actually still on chapter 15, though some element of the discussion in chapter 15 is about, we covered the last time on some of the challenges of society and how, one attains peace, individual peace, and how one, nurtures, fosters, and enhances world peace. And the topic is very timely because this week we celebrated Deepavali. We had some, great celebration on Saturday in our center. Many homes had celebrations, in their own homes with family and friends. So Deepavali is a very important and auspicious function for the Hindus, but it's celebrated around the world, given that the uh, Hindu diaspora is spread across the world, and it has become now a universal celebration, in many parts of the world. But what does actually Deepavali really mean? And oftentimes, we celebrate, we have a lot of food, we have family. In some homes, they have a lot of drinks, not just soft drinks, but also a lot of hard drinks, alcohol and so on. So it's a very festive celebration. People celebrate in different ways. So it seemed to be a festival of get together, food, drinks, a lot of cookies and lots of delicacies. Different traditions have different delicacies. The South Indians have South Indian cakes, and the North Indians. So there are a lot of festivities. But let's step back a little bit and see what is the significance of Deepavali. And there are many stories that are attached to Deepavali. Of course, one of the main stories is how Deepavali is a day of celebration when Sri Rama finished his 14 years of, exile in the jungle with his wife Sita and brother, and he slayed the demon called Ravana, a 10-headed demon who took Sita and caused a lot of misery for many people. Although he was a very righteous king in the sense that he was very powerful, he practiced meditation, he had the blessings of many gods, yet he caused a lot of misery for Sri Rama and of course abducting Sita. There are many stories, interpretations of this Ramayana, but I'll give you my interpretation of what this story is. The second story is actually about another, demon called Naraga Asura. Naraga means hell. Asura means demons. So again, Sri Krishna orchestrated his demise through various practices and various, initiating, things to slay these demons. I won't go into the details. I think many of you all can follow the stories. You can pick up the stories in many of the, nowadays on internet, you can pick up many stories. But I'll give you here what the understanding that I have had, which I was taught by my parents, my father, who was a guru, what I have picked up through meditation, introspection, contemplation, reflection, what this Deepavali actually means. And I've put here this picture of Narakasura, which is got very similar to Ravana, 10 heads, and why we celebrate Deepavali, right? So The word Deepavali, actually, most people call Diwali. Actually, the word Deepavali is actually spelled differently. And it actually is about the slaying of the demons. Though the stories I spoke about are Sri Rama slaying Ravana and, Naragasura. Naragasura is the hell that demons cause. And what these great saints and sages wanted to teach us through these stories is that the Asura or the demon is not outside us. The Ravanas and the Naragasuras are actually within us, with our own mind. So when we carry all these demons with us, the Naraga or the Asuras are demons, our mind becomes a hell, right? And that is what these great saints and sages wanted to teach us through these stories. And in this context, the 10 heads for me refers to the first biggest head is actually ego, right? This ego that gets into our way. I think all of us know what this ego is. This the self. Fully focused on the material self, right? And the material wealth, the materiality, entrenched in the materiality. And we see that the characters that are depicted in these various epic stories, you see that they're always ornamented with so much glitter and so much materiality, as though they're showing their wealth, their material wealth. And we see this a lot in our own lives, right? There are people that like to flaunt and show their wealth as though the value comes only when the wealth or the material identity possesses all these things, right? And you see that sometimes people refer to themselves as these material titles. We have those egos, many people have those egos. The other heads actually refer to all the qualities of life, qualities that we have that make our mind shrunken and our intellect blunt. And what are they? They actually anger, you know. In this case, the demons had a lot of anger, Small thing, they get very angry, right? Cruelty, they're cruel to not only, the people around them, you know, to nature, to animals, and that, wanting to harm people. They get pleasure from harming people, right? And we see that there are some people that just want to torment others, say things. Sometimes it may not be physical, but sometimes say cruel things, harsh words that hurt people. The other quality of the demons that we carry in our mind is injustice. Sometimes we take the path of, what is right. We don't take the path of that righteousness, right? And sometimes we not only partake in that injustice, we condone those injustice. We see people being treated badly. We become complicit to it by being silent. And I always remember my gurus telling that, we are educated and we get this knowledge to be able to make a difference. So when we see that the poor, the last, least, and the lost, when they are in difficulties, when they need support, don't put them down, lift them up, you see, and give them a chance to make a difference. I think all of us, many of us come from very poor families. Our grandparents migrated to this country and under very harsh conditions. They worked very hard, but along the way they had people that helped them, supported them, and gave them a chance to make their lives better. So we see that this asuras, they have injustice. They always put people down, with their words, with their deeds, with their actions. And that's one of the qualities of this asuras. You know, not only, whenever people come, when they're in the presence of people, they make those environment like hell. The other qualities is the possessiveness. There's so much wanting everything, even how much land given also not enough, how much wealth is not enough, right? And this possessiveness, the craving for the materiality, not realizing that all this also will dissipate. And we saw these asuras that are, depicted here in this context. Ravana wanted a beautiful wife of Sri Rama. It was very interesting that some stories which is written by these great saints, Valmiki, and one point where Sri Ravana was talking to Valmiki Maharishi, saying, "Look, I'm trying to allure Sita to me, but she's so caught up with Sri Rama. What can I do to allure her?" And Valmiki said, "Why don't you disguise like Sri Rama? Take the form of Sri Rama." Oh, he said, "That's a great idea." And just as he's wanting to transform himself into Sri Rama, a thought crossed his mind. What if I transform into Sri Rama, and when I become Sri Rama, the thought of possessing somebody else's wife or property will not be there, right? So the mere fact that becoming godly transforms the mind, and Ravana got frightened, that, hey, that means that I would not possess her. So he dropped that idea. So here Valmiki Maharishi was writing in a beautiful way of that transformation of the mind in this small depiction of that doubt that Sri Ravana had if he transformed to become Sri Rama. So the possessiveness still existed. So he still abducted Sita. And I won't go into the details of the story. I think all of you can read it. The other thing that oftentimes we have had is greed. Even how much we have also is not enough, right? Whether it's food or whether it's clothing or material or things. Lust is the other important thing that human beings have. Part of nature building that, but when it becomes overly, we see that we get blinded. Jealousy, selfishness, pride, hatred, all those qualities are what makes the human mind shrunken. So we see that, these qualities that are possessed by, these demons that are depicted by these great saints actually are also part of our mental DNA. And this story teaches us that why our lives are like hell is because we carry all these demons. So here it is depicted in this context. So how do we overcome this? And this is where we see that whenever there is a challenge in life, so these great saints come out with the solutions. And they talk about the Deepavali. Deepa is the inner light. He says that as long as we are in the material world, we often are caught up by this various, tentacles of this materiality, anger, hatred, jealousy, greed, all those things that makes our mind shrunken. And this is also discussed by Mahan, and even in the Bhagavad Gita, where Sri Krishna advises Arjuna on that all this material, entrapment makes the mind shrunken. He says it's karpanya dosha, a shrunken mind that makes us unillumined. So in all the scriptures, including in this story of this Ramayana and Bhagavad Gita, it speaks about that inner light, the Deepavali in all of us. Deepa means inner light. So we have to transition from that materiality to that inner spiritual self. And this is depicted in this Deepavali story. How do we slay that demon? The demon of, you know, ignorance, the demon of unillumined state. And sometimes this is called sin. Sin is actually an unillumined state of carrying all these negative qualities. And he says that this unillumined state can only be dispelled through illumination of that inner self. And that inner self is depicted by the light. You know, Deepavali is actually about the inner light. And in most homes during Deepavali, we light the earthen lamp. And we see that the earthen lamp has very important meaning. And I'm sure all of you all would have read the article that I wrote on Deepavali Day on what that earthen lamp means. And we see that, you know, the earthen lamp has some important qualities. And what are the qualities? So we see that the earthen lamp, you know, it's made out of clay, and that clay refers to the body, right? It is assembled from earth, you know, and we see that it holds an important fuel. Sometimes we use refined oil, ghee, and that's referred to refined thoughts. And this is really important because the earthen lamp, which refers to the body, is actually Mother Earth itself, right? So we carry a part of Mother Earth. You know, it depicts, you know, if you see Earth from the formless, you know, it takes on a form of the earthen lamp, and ultimately it goes back to that formless state, right? And he says that this, remember that your body comes from Mother Earth. You don't possess anything on your own. Hence, have a lot of respect for Mother Earth or Mother Nature. Have a lot of respect for the body that has been given to you. Do not abuse yourself nor Mother Earth. If we abuse Mother Earth, you know, like what we are doing now with all the pollution and so on, ultimately our food is going to be contaminated. The air is going to be contaminated. Ultimately, the body is going to get sick. And today we see that, you know, we use so much plastics that, you know, scientists say that plastics can be found in the new fetus, the blood. If we did a test, we will see in all of our blood, we'll have microplastics because we have, you know, thrown all these plastics into the rivers and everything, and ultimately affects our body. So here Valmiki and the great saints are saying that treasure Mother Earth and treasure the body. If you harm one, it impacts the other. The refined oil that is in that earthen lamp is to depict our thoughts. We see that sometimes in the ghee, you know, when we put in the ghee, it's hard, but when we light it, you see that it melts. And there is the softness. The more polluted that oil is, you see that the light will not be stable. It'll always be crackling. It'll always be making a lot of noise, a lot of smoke. In that same way, when our mind is not pure, it shows up in our thoughts, it shows up in our behavior, it shows up in our speech, you know, in the what we speak. So here, how bright and beautiful the light is depends very much on the refinement of that oil, the refinement of the thought, right? If the ghee or the oil is contaminated, the fire will have lots of smoke, right? So here, the great saints are depicting through this light that cultivate divine and noble thoughts. Your outlook of life will be inspirational and will blaze majestically. And that's what these great saints are teaching us, what this Deepavali is. The third component is the wick. You know, the wick here is so important, right? If the wick has to be materials that are combustible. So if it's not good quality material, you see that the light would not light well. it'll close off or it'll crackle. So we see that wick, in Tamil we call it thiri, right? Is our intellect. The more refined our intellect is, the more sharper our intellect is, like the wick, it is able to absorb the ghee beautifully with the stream. The material has to be able to absorb that ghee and channel that ghee as a combustion for the light. In that same way, the mind that is touched by a sharp, expanded, deep intellect will be able to transform the thoughts into blazing ideas, experiences, and also lead the way. So here, what is really interesting is that, this wick, the quality of the wick is so important. The quality of our intellect is very important. So it's not how much you learn from, getting a lot of degrees or all those things. It's about how refined, this is what we call the jnana, the wisdom knowledge, right? And this wisdom knowledge, or the refined wick of the mind, can only come through the process of introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. That wick or the intellect becomes sharp, the wick or the intellect becomes more refined, more deeper. And it is able to channel the thoughts beautifully to give it a state of enlightenment. But for the wick to be lit beautifully, you see that it cannot be too short. It has to be dipped beautifully and coated with that oil or the ghee. But more importantly, if you see that it cannot be too long, nor can it be too short. If it's too short, the light will not light well. If it's too long, it'll burn up very quickly. So there is an optimal length that the wick has to be, so that it blazes beautifully in a sustainable way, right? And anyone who's lit this will know what I'm talking about. So the intellect needs to be deep enough into that oil, into the thoughts. That means the thoughts need to be, the intellect needs to go deep enough, but also it's deep within, but also be out there to be able to shine. So this is beautifully, as what Swami says, paramum aparamum. That inner cosmos and the external cosmos is linked by that intellect that is at the optimum level. So again, we see that for that intellect to blaze beautifully, it has to be deep enough and also be out there blazing. That means experiencing the material world. So this is why Swamiji Arivin Arivat, it is not theoretical knowledge, knowledge that is immersed deeply into the thoughts through introspection, contemplation, reflection, and to be able to reflect that inner self and the external experiences. So here, this majestically, glowing requires, there's a whole physics behind this. And what is really interesting is that the light that is lit shines equally everywhere. There's no direction. It shines equally, right? And wherever it is there, it dispels that darkness. So in this, what I have learned from the simple lamp that we light refers to that inner light that we have, but the inner light is deep within ourselves, and for it to be realized, we need to have a healthy body, a sharp intellect, and a calm and a beautiful mind that is, in the state of contemplation, reflection, and meditation. And this is what that spiritual compass that I spoke about in many of the other satsangs. So Deepavali is the light within us that lights us. And that's what, it's not about an external journey. It's not about the festivities and the food and all the external experiences, drinks, and so on. It's about an inner journey that gives us that understanding of that beautiful external experience. So what happens here is that this inner light that we light is what Mahan calls Paranjodi, the Jodi that comes from that Paramburu, that universal personality, is within all of us. We carry that DNA. So Deepavali is actually to tell us that the light is within us. And if we had that light, it leads us to a path of enlightenment. What does that mean? It means that, that inner light leads us. Remember, we had the ego, that ego which is self-centered, now becomes more universal, because that light within us is the light that is permeating in the entire nature. So we see that what we had of anger, hatred, jealousy, all that over time starts transforming. You get that calmness, sense of kindness, people had that cruelty that starts dissipating, the kindness, the injustice transforms. Say, hey, we should not be doing this. We should not be sitting down quietly. We should be doing something. And we see the justice, the possessiveness starts dropping off. We have the non-attachment. This is what we call vairagya, the viveka and the vairagya, the ability to discriminate between what is real and unreal, what is justice and injustice, what is cruelty and what's kindness, what's anger and calmness, right? What is possessiveness, and that state of non-attachment, spatial, neither attached nor detached. The sense of altruism, wanting to do things that, for others. From that lust to that love, that unconditional love for life and, everything nature has bestowed us and around us. The sense of appreciation of, wow, this is an awesome life, giving the best. From the selfishness to the selflessness, and ultimately, that from the pride factor to that state of humility, all the hatred, jealousy, everything dissipates. So that inner light is there it's like when the sun comes out, the dew on that tree and the leaves disappear. In that same way, when that through the introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, which is what that Deepavali function is, to lead us to the path of enlightenment, that we move from an individual identity to a universal identity. All this, when that happens, that small I to the big I, we see that all this material frailties, that, the karmic forces, all this attachment, the gravity of the materiality slowly starts dissipating. And we start seeing that, hey, that inner light that in us leads us to that spiritual compass. And what does an enlightened life means? Does it mean a life of a monk and, a life of an ascetic? Well, one can pursue that if that's what the ambition is. But Mahan and other great saints, even Valmiki, if you look at Sri Rama, he lived a princely life, country. He did not run away to become an ascetic. All the ascetics speak about the Sri Rama, who's lived a normal life with a wife, 2 children, and all those things, right? The great saints and sages speak about this. What is it that enlightened living means? It means at the core that we build the Deepavali is actually our spiritual capital. That's the enlightener, the illuminator. And we acquire that. When we acquire that, we have solid mental capital. Our mind is unshakable. Our mind is unblemishable because we have that universal identity in us. And that's what Deepavali is teaching, supposed to teach us, to unlock that spirit within us. and not take the spirit in the bottle, that you have to pay 300-400 ringgit, right? That inner spirit that we are blessed with. When we have that, we see that our physical capital, our body, we appreciate our body better. We cherish our body. We cherish this life, in this material life that we have, in the best possible way. We don't abuse it. We use it for the betterment of ourselves, our families, the communities that we live in, and the human society. And we see that as we become more healthier, as we become more sharper, because when our mental capital is really good, we see that our body becomes stronger too. We don't have that pressure, the stress. Stress is the biggest killer, right? And we see that, when we have physical capital, we see that our intellectual capital, ability to think, ability to understand, ability to analyze, becomes much more stronger. And that's what the inner light is showing us, the path of enlightenment, that we have that intellect to solve any problems, right? And that's what the Deepavali is, that leads us to Deepavali. That means the path of, understanding things better, right? And when we understand things better, it unlocks the creativity in us. That creative capital emerges. We have new ideas, new way of looking at things. Our creative capital emerges. And the beautiful thing is that through the intellect and the creative capital, we understand that natural capital in all of us. Nature has not given us everything in this material world, but nature has blessed us with something that we are good in. And it is for us to discover, right? Whether it's mathematics, or, whether it's poetry, or whether it's writing, or whether debating or cooking, whatever it is, nature's blessed us with something amazing. Through this path of enlightenment, we need to discover what is it that nature's blessed us, and give us purpose in this life. When we have that, the ability to have social capital, ability to relate to people, ability to, from a child right up to the scientist, ability to, have good understanding. Even when people have disputes or challenges, you know how to tactfully address them. That's social capital. Many people find it hard to relate to other people. And as I mentioned earlier, the calmness, the kindness, all those things are really important for the social capital, the understanding, right? And we see that, that social capital leads us to that empowered capital, the ability to think, hey, I can do it myself. I have the self in me. I have that infinite possibilities and infinite potentialities to overcome any challenges in life and to create value for myself and others, right? You don't need the handout of anyone. As nature has blessed us with everything, we're able to create value for everyone. And that's what empowered capital is. You feel awesome. I have the divinity in me. I always ask this question. If you have God with you, if you have the universal personality with you, do you need anything else? Would you beg for anything else? No, and this is what this light reveals to us, that you've blessed with this divinity, right? Harness it, use it, don't search for it anywhere else. That's what Deepavali is. And through this, you see that you enhance your leadership capital, ability to not only lead yourself, but lead other people, lead your family members. I always say that, if you have the spiritual capital, you did all this, you become a CEO, Chief Enlightenment Officer. I keep telling people, you become CEO of your life. You don't have to be dependent on anything, right? You have that inner voice, inner guide to guide you. And that's what Deepavali is, that leads to the Deepavali, right? That leadership capital to lead yourself, lead others. When you are a CEO, Chief Enlightenment Officer, you become a Chief Executive Officer. You have executive power over everything. And finally, if you did all this to harnessing that inner light that we celebrate Deepavali or Deepavali, we acquire that economic capital, the adequate resources that we need to sustain ourselves. We may not be billionaires and millionaires, but we have adequate material resources that we can generate ourselves to sustain ourselves and our families. And this is what that Deepavali means, to discover that inner light, that earthen lamp that depicts that spiritual compass in us, that leads us to this beautiful universal mind with the calmness, kindness, justice, non-attachment, the altruism, you know, that unconditional love, the appreciation, that selflessness that leads us to that realized state, and ultimately that humility to be able to, do this in a very simple, without any pomp and pageantry. And this is what Deepavali actually means to all of us, at least from reading the scriptures of the great saints of Valmiki Maharishi, Veda Vyasa, and also Mahans and the many, many other saints and sages that show us this path of enlightenment. And if we are able to unlock the spiritual capital, every day would be a Deepavali day. Every moment will be a Deepavali moment. And every facet of our lives becomes that Deepavali, not just that one day in October or November. Every day is a Deepavali day. And this is what I learned from my guru, Mahan, and reading, researching, and trying to understand and put into practice. And if you did that, our mind becomes so powerful, so enlightened. And that's what Deepavali actually means to me. That discovery of that inner light that becomes that, you know, uh, that light that shows us the path. Somewhat like, um, on a dark sea, you see that, the lighthouse guides us. This is the path. In that same way, in that quietude of the mind, that inner light beautifully shows us the direction of our own universal identity. And when we discover that, everything becomes illumined and enlightened. Sandosham. Thank you.